Hello, everyone. My name is Jean Laurich, the Sister of St. Joseph from the Sisters in Philadelphia. I have the privilege of being the Mission Integration Coordinator for the congregation, and it's my privilege to welcome you today to Mount St. Joseph Convent here in the Heritage area, a sacred place where we have gathered artifacts in the history of our congregation. This is the original home of Joseph Middleton, and it has become, since 1858, a sacred space, a mother house. In business terms, it would be called the corporate headquarters for the congregation. So we'd like to offer you a brief history of our story, recognizing that home is where our story begins. So we welcome you into our home. And as the tour guide takes us through, I'd ask you to consider what part of this history, this story speaks to you. What does this story ask of you? And our tour guide for today and many tours is Ryan Murphy. And I'll let him tell you more about himself and how he has come to know this story as well.
Hello, my name is Ryan Murphy. I'm the Director of Experiential Learning and an adjunct instructor of sociology at Chestnut Hill College, where I've had the privilege of serving for the past 15 years. I'm also an associate of the Sisters of St. Joseph, where as a layperson, I commit my life to uphold the mission and core values of the congregation in all of my relationships and in my work. It's my privilege, after Sister Jean's introduction, to lead you all through a brief history of the Sisters of St. Joseph. So our story begins back in 1650 in Le Puy, France. This is an overhead shot of Le Puy, which is located in a volcanic basin. You'll see the two chimneys, the remnants of volcanoes in the upper left-hand corner of this picture. And you'll also notice the red tile roofs, an aesthetic that we have kept at Chestnut Hill College and a number of other sponsored ministries around North America and in Philadelphia. 1650 in Le Puy was a time of great misery and great strife. It was a time of war and famine, socioeconomic hardship. And because of those difficulties, a Jesuit priest who was missioned there, Father Jean-Pierre Médaille, felt that there could be a new opportunity for women who felt a vocation calling from God to serve God's people. He envisioned a life of women doing apostolic work. So apart from sisters who found a vocation as lives living in cloister, spending the day in prayer, Father Médaille envisioned a life where these women would go out and meet the needs of the people, caring for the sick, feeding the hungry, and ministering to the poor. So Father Médaille gathered 6 women to form what he called the Little Design. And these 6 women were the first Sisters of St. Joseph. They began each morning around a kitchen, around a hearth, where they would address what Médaille called the miseries of the day. They would leave this space, go out into the villages and towns surrounding Le Puy, minister to those in need, and would return each evening to talk about where they experienced God's presence. This spiritual reflection activity, called sharing the state of the heart, is something that's particularly crucial to the spiritual lives of the Sisters of St. Joseph and those who partner in mission with them. What Médaille was doing was quite radical for the time. Women didn't have too many opportunities apart from marriage and family, or if they did find a vocation calling, it was spending that time in cloister. So what he was doing, having sisters go out and do apostolic work, was particularly radical for the time. So much so that some of his Jesuit superiors back in Rome, when they were doing an annual supervision of him, they wrote that the work that he was doing was, quote, fantastic. And fantastic is not used in perhaps the way that we might understand it, but it's something that was particularly alarming. But yet they didn't stop him. They allowed Médaille to continue his work with the sisters, recognizing that the work that they were doing was good and was responding to God's call. The congregation began to support itself through the making of lace, and this is an example of Le Puy lace or bobbin lace. Those original 6 sisters and the sisters who joined them as the congregation grew would make lace and sell it. They would also teach young women and widows to make lace as a means of self-sufficiency to support themselves. As the community grew, and we get closer to the French Revolution, it was a time of great upheaval. Persons of faith were forced to go into seclusion or denounce their faith. Many even left the country. In fact, 4 Sisters of St. Joseph were executed at the guillotine in this rather dramatic painting in the lower left-hand corner. One of the women who was scheduled to die as a martyr was Jean Fontbonne. And as the story goes, on the evening before her scheduled execution, she was prepared to die as a servant of God, and Robespierre fell, and the reign of terror ended. So Jean Fontbonne, who we now know as Mother St. John Fontbonne, from the ashes of the French Revolution, her life was spared, and in 1807, she refounded the congregation through a series of communities around Lyon, and again, through the ashes of the French Revolution, gave rebirth to the congregation of the Sisters of St. Joseph. So we celebrate Mother St. John Fontbonne as one of the foundresses of our congregation. For the next 30 years, the community grows throughout France. In 1836, there's a call from North America in what at that point in time were the frontier lands of the United States. Bishop Rosati writes to a fellow bishop colleague in France asking if there are sisters who could help minister on the frontier lands. 6 women crossed the Atlantic and in 1836 settled in Cahokia and also Carondelet, just outside of St. Louis, Missouri. This is an image of the first mother house, which, as you can see, is a primitive log cabin. It was a difficult time for the sisters. There's a number of writings that talk about experiencing rodents and other forms of vermin. It was extraordinarily hot and humid on the banks of the Mississippi, but the sisters got right to work addressing the needs of the times, something that is critical to their history. The sisters first began ministering to deaf persons, to Native Americans, and to the children of freed black slaves, always looking to extend their mission and ministry to those living on the margins. In this charcoal sketch or faded black and white image of the mother house in St. Louis some decades later, there's evidence that this was a stop on the Underground Railroad, where sisters were providing sanctuary for escaped black persons, escaped slaves prior to the Civil War. So in North America, outside of St. Louis and Carondelet, is the first settlement of the Sisters of St. Joseph in this continent. Some 10 years later, in 1847, there's a call from Philadelphia. Philadelphia's Bishop Francis Patrick Kenrick writes to his brother, Bishop Kenrick in St. Louis, and makes that same call. Do you have any sisters who can help minister in my city? So 4 Sisters of St. Joseph, led by Julie Fournier, who we see here. She herself was born in France, desired life as a missionary, and came over on the 2nd or 3rd wave of sisters who came from France after that first group in 1836. But under Sister Julie Fournier's leadership, the group travels east to settle in Philadelphia, where they begin ministering again to deaf persons. They take over work at St. John's Orphanage. They work in St. Joseph's Hospital, addressing the needs of the day, the needs of the times in Philadelphia. Bishop Kenrick pronounced them, quote, ready for any and all good work, which is a saying that's become a hallmark of this congregation, responding to whatever needs are to be addressed at the times. While in this area, in the eastern part of the United States, their second stop in North America, the sisters are working in a number of different regions. The first place that they set up a mother house is outside of Gettysburg in McSherrystown, and it's there that they begin the first Mount St. Joseph Academy School for Girls. There are sisters working in McSherrystown, sisters working in Philadelphia at the orphanage, sisters working throughout the Philadelphia region. Mother St. John, who at this point in time becomes the Mother Superior, or what today we would call Congregational President, recognizes that she needs a more stable, centralized location for a mother house for this congregation. Mother St. John has had a long storied friendship with Philadelphia's Bishop Newman, today known as St. John Newman, and with his help, locates a property to purchase for a more centralized mother house location in the Philadelphia area. Bishop Newman actually located and identified 3 possible locations. The first was in West Philadelphia, not far from the St. John's Orphanage, and this was actually the one that many of the sisters in the congregation were hoping for because it was close to where they were living and working. The second location was out in Radnor Township, out near Villanova today. And the third location was in a rather undeveloped part of the northwest corner of Philadelphia. And of course, that's where the sisters settled. And one of the primary reasons why Mother St. John chose this location for the Mother House is she was known for having, quote, a very slender purse. And this was the property that she could afford. So as Sister Jean mentioned, this property was owned by the Middleton family, and this is a painting of the Middleton mansion known as Monticello due to his great admiration for Thomas Jefferson. So when the sisters purchased this property in 1858, within 6 weeks they began a school on the first floor. In fact, in the rooms where we're walking at this moment, the sisters themselves lived on the second floor, and they taught school for girls, Mount St. Joseph Academy, on the first floor. From there, the congregation continues to grow. Mount St. Joseph Academy eventually moves up the street into Flowertown at its current location. The Sisters of St. Joseph begin Chestnut Hill College in 1924, and the buildings adjacent to the Mother House are taken over from the Academy, and the college begins its long journey, moving into 100 years from that space.
So Ryan's given us a whirlwind tour of our history. And currently we find ourselves serving in 11 states throughout the United States and service opportunities in underdeveloped countries. There are currently 630 Sisters of St. Joseph serving in education, pastoral ministries, as well as hospital, and also serving the deaf, continuing the good works begun in St. Louis. Ryan mentioned that he's an associate of the Sisters of St. Joseph. Associates and partners in mission, those lay partners who work in our sponsored ministries, give the sisters hope that this legacy, this mission of unioning all will continue into the future. You've heard Ryan say that sisters were ready for any good work, ready for any and all good work, and they were contemplative in action. You know, they were apostolic from 1650 and continue to be apostolic, as well as very reflective women steeped in the spirituality of the Jesuits and the Salesians, the Oblates of St. Francis. So thank you for being with us today. And again, go back to that question, what speaks to you in this story? And what does this history ask of you as a partner in mission? And remember, you give us hope